Let's start with a simple but super important question. Who are we even preparing the financial statements for? That's where the reporting entity comes in. A reporting entity is the unit whose financial information we're presenting. That could be a single company, like a small startup, or a group of companies, like a parent company with multiple subsidiaries. The key point, the reporting entity tells us what's included in the financial statements. For example, if a parent company owns 100% of a smaller company, it doesn't just report its own financials, it consolidates the subsidiaries' information too. So, defining the reporting entity sets the scope of the financial reports. Without that, we'd have no clue whose numbers we are actually looking at. Now that we know who we are reporting for, the next step is, what do we include in the financial statements and how do we measure it? This brings us to two key terms. 1. Recognition. This is about when an item actually gets recorded in the financial statements, like when does a cost become an expense, or when does something officially become an asset. 2. Measurement. This is all about how we assign a value to that item. And oh boy, there's more than one way to measure something. Some common measurement bases include historical cost, what you paid for it, fair value, what it's worth right now, value in use, what it's worth based on the cash flows it'll bring in over time. Choosing the right measurement base can totally change the numbers you see on the financial statements. So it's kind of a big deal. First up, historical cost. This is probably the most straightforward measurement base. It simply means recording the asset at the amount you paid for it when you got it. So if a company buys a machine for $50,000, that's the value that goes on the books. It's simple, objective, and reliable because it's based on an actual transaction. That's why it's commonly used for tangible assets like buildings or machinery. But here's the catch. It doesn't change over time. So even if the machine becomes way more valuable or way less, you still see that original $50,000 on the balance sheet. Great for stability, not so great for reflecting current value. Next, we've got fair value, a more dynamic and market-based approach. Fair value is the price you'd get if you sold the asset today in an open, active market. So instead of focusing on what you paid, we look at what it's currently worth. Example, let's say a company owns a piece of land that it bought for $600,000, but today it could easily sell for $1 million. Fair value lets us show that updated value on the financial statements. It's often used for things like investment properties or financial instruments where market prices are easy to observe. But of course, with great flexibility comes great responsibility because fair value can be tricky when markets are volatile or inactive. And finally, we have value in use, which is a bit more forward-looking. This method is based on the present value of future cash flows that an asset is expected to generate. So instead of thinking about what we paid or what we could sell it for, we're asking, how much is this asset worth to us based on the money it'll help bring in over time? This is super common in impairment testing. For example, if a factory's performance drops, we might recalculate its value based on expected future income. If that value is lower than what's on the books, we might need to write it down. So value in use is less about the market and more about the utility the asset provides to the business itself. It takes a bit more judgment and estimation, but it helps give a more realistic view when assets aren't easily sold.